Hey, Vision of Faith Church. I'm on my way to Centerville right now to visit my family. And as I was driving, with complete understanding that this is pretty dangerous to drive and videotape myself, but as I sit and drive it and head to Centerville, I think about this message that we're about to talk about, and about what God's going to do through it. And I just want to take a few minutes to kind of introduce it. I thought the best way to introduce a video about, or excuse me, a message about a road trip is to be on the road. The message that you're going to hear today is called Are We There Yet? It's all about the journey that we're on in our lives and the progress that we're making in our lives. But if you really think about what we're doing here and what we're doing to exist in this life, you have to think about the end result, and you've got to think about the journey to that point. So the reason I call this Are We There Yet? Because we're talking about our lives. We're talking about how we have to trust God in our lives to progress. And it has a lot to do with this road trip. We're going to take a trip through your lives, and we're going to look at different positions that we can be in. Some good, some not so good. Because we really have to examine where we are and how we are trusting God with our lives so that we can progress, so that we can get the most out of this life that God has for us. We're going to look at our life like it was a car that we would drive on a road trip. We're going to look at different positions that we can be in the car that allows us to trust or to not trust God in our lives. Questions that we've got to ask ourselves as we go through this is, one, where do we stand? Two, how is our trust in God? And how is it playing out in our life? And three, is it worth it? Questions that we've got to ask ourselves. Questions that you have to answer for yourself so you know where you're going. Several years ago, I was driving. I had my family in the car, my beautiful two nieces and Greg and Nasha, and we were coming back from Pearland from seeing an aunt. And we were on top of a huge bridge, and I just started thinking about, I was driving and I was thinking about the responsibility I had to protect them as the driver. And that was a lot of pressure for me. I started getting very nervous and ended up having a panic attack because I was thinking about my two nieces, who I would probably love more than anything in this world, and how it was my responsibility to keep them safe as a driver. And it just made me more and more nervous, and I think that's what led to the panic attack. But there was a lot of fear there, and ever since then I've had a fear of bridges. So if you ever hear anything about bridges or see anything about bridges and see that I'm nervous, that's why. But it really explains a lot about the pressures of being a driver and how nervous it made me. First position we're going to look at is the driver. Now, what do we know about the driver? First of all, the driver is in complete control of the car. He decides when to turn, when to go straight, how fast to go. He's in complete control. Not only that, but he is in complete control of the safety of the people in the car. His decisions could change the people in the car, if you think about it. If I decide to randomly turn my wheel right now, I would probably crash into one of these cars, and if there was somebody with me, we could be injured. Sounds silly, I know, but if you really think about it, there's a lot of responsibilities for the driver. So let's look at the driver in our life. As I sit here in traffic, let's talk about position number two. Position number 2 would be the front seat passenger. Now, on most road trips, the person who's sitting in the front seat as a passenger usually takes the title on as navigator, telling the driver where to go, where to turn, usually has the map in their hand, or these days you'd have a cell phone map or map on a cell phone, navigating. Now let's apply that to our lives. A lot of times what we do is try to be the navigator. We trust God with a lot of things in our life, but we like to tell Him where we want to go. We like to tell Him where we want to end up and what our plans are, instead of trusting Him to navigate our life. I remember being on a lot of road trips in the past, and I've had friends that were navigators, some good, some not so good. And I remember one specific friend would always tell me where to turn after we already passed the road. Every single time. It drove me crazy. And then I've had those navigators where they self-appointed navigators, and I already knew where I was going, and they would try to tell me more that I was either going the wrong direction or took the wrong turn, even though I was going the right direction. And they would try to force it upon me, and it just drove me absolutely nuts. I can only imagine being God and trying to tell Him where we need to be going. It's just silly. You know, as I sit here on this road trip right now, it brings me back to my childhood, and one of the things I used to love doing as a kid was traveling. My grandparents used to have a motorhome, and they would travel all over the country, staying at different places, and every now and then, mostly the summers, they'd let me go with them to different trips, and I used to look so forward to them. I used to love them. I used to love to get in the car and to just go somewhere and travel with them. Just watching my grandparents communicate. My grandpa used to have harmonica, and he used to play it in the car, and I used to love to listen to him, and it was just so much fun just to sit back, and I used to get cozy and lay in the back and just fall asleep, and before I knew it, we'd be there. It was awesome. I think about as we get older, why do we not look forward to road trips as much? Is because we have a different perspective. When we're the driver or the navigator, we take on the responsibilities of the gas and the money to get to places and where we're going to stay. Or especially if you have kiddos, you have to worry about making sure they get fed, or bathroom breaks, or so forth. But to that child, it's so fun. They get to sit back and just enjoy it. And which brings us to number 3, the backseat rider. That position is drastically different than the first two, because they don't have to worry about getting to the destination. They don't have to worry about the wrong directions or the safety. They get to sit back and enjoy the ride. A lot like what we do with God, or what we can do with God. We could sit back and allow Him and trust Him to take control of our lives. Well, I made it to Centerville, and I'm parked in front of my parents' house, and this whole message kind of becomes surreal at this moment, because I was sitting there thinking about the destination or the road trip itself, and thinking about, the last 2 hours, even though it's not a long time, but just being on the road, I was motivated. And it's not about the road trip, it's not about being on the road, but it's about this point right here, the destination. Because I know in a few seconds when I get out of this car and I go through that door, I know several things are going to happen. Why do I know that? Because I know the people behind that door. And I know as soon as I walk in, I'm going to be greeted with unbelievable amount of love and joy, because I know the people behind that door adore me, and I know them, and I know the amount of love that they have for me, just about as much love as I have for them. And I have to tell you, that motivated me to get here. And I think about this question that we're asking today, are we there yet? Which is implying a destination. And this whole message comes to this moment right here. What destination are we seeking? Because this whole idea of me walking through this door and being greeted by people who love me and adore me doesn't come close to the amount of love and adoration that I will get when I get to heaven. Because I know when I get there, Jesus is going to greet me and love on me like no other. Why? Why do I know this? Because I know Jesus like I know my family. And you know what? When I walk through that door, it's going to feel like home. And when I get to heaven, it's going to feel like home. Because that's my destination. That's what motivates me in this life and in this journey. So that's something that we have to ask ourselves, are we there yet? What is motivating us? Are we trying to drive and navigate our way through this life, or are we trusting God? It's something that we have to think about. But for now, I'm going home.